Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. I never know the direction these interviews will take. I'm not gonna lie, it is so fun going into the conversation with one simple goal in mind. And that's to make sure that you walk away with tangible things that you can use to help take your career to the next level. My guest today really got into the business side of sports during our conversation. And it makes sense. Karen Forgus is the Senior Vice President of Business Operations for the Cincinnati Reds. Karen talked about why data and metrics matter, the value of connecting with the fans, as well as showing the ROI on that connection. Let me tell you, that is not easy to do. She talks about the value of having a marketing model, why it's important to become an expert in one area, and the list goes on. Not only does Karen talk about the business side, she gets candid and talks about how imposter syndrome impacted her. And get this, she thought she was being hired for a part-time role, and on her first day with the Reds, she was made vice president. All right, ladies, it is time to jump into Karen's incredible story. Karen, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast.
Hey, thank you. I really love the fact there's a platform for women to come together who are in this industry, because it is truly an industry.
Yes, I agree. So before we jump into your career, and I can't wait, I have so many questions, but before we get there, take us back and tell us when you fell in love with sports or when sports had an impact in your life.
I think if you really are paying attention, it starts when you're little because your parents want you to get tired, so they send you outside. So, I mean, really, and again, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which in my heyday, it was home to the big red machine of the 70s in baseball. So and back then, you got to remember in the 70s, and this is when I was a teenager, there was not cable TV, there wasn't the internet. You had 3 networks and maybe 1 alternative station, and you literally had 6 months of a baseball game almost every day that was like a town meeting that nobody missed. So literally grew up as our family time. Every week, most people around me went to church or they went to a Reds game. Or they were definitely listening to it outside because nobody really even had air conditioning. It was just starting to become the thing. So it's always been in my DNA as a Cincinnatian that this was such a baseball town and baseball was that. But I can tell you, to be honest, it never occurred to me to work there because I didn't understand. I just knew there were players and then there was a concession worker. Everything in between, I didn't really care about. And even the broadcasters seemed so remote to me that it didn't seem like how many people even had to do this job besides those on the field. So the fact that I'm working in it is really fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So you're working for the team that you grew up loving. Is that right?
Yes, exactly right. I am. And that's one of those other things where my attachment to the team is really more about my family experiences. And just kind of what it meant to us as a family than what it meant to me when I was an entertainment seeker, in my 20s. And then once I got married, became a mom myself, what it became to me. So that's my engagement with it. As far as being overly in love with the game of baseball, I don't have the knowledge that people who are truly sabermetric geeks and, fantasy baseball players, I don't have that kind of mindset for it. Mine's just much more about the common fan, common man mindset. So for me to be here is great. And honestly, my way in was legit because it was in the marketing front, to try to find the people that weren't coming to games and why, and to get them to come in. And I understood that.
Okay. Tell everybody what you do and who you do it for.
Yeah, so with the Cincinnati Reds, like many, many teams in professional sports, it's actually owned by a couple of families in Cincinnati and a bunch of local Cincinnati investors, because we understand kind of the civic importance of this entity regionally. So I was hired on by them the second year that they owned the club, which was 2007. They bought it in 6. I first came in for marketing because they were creating, first time ever, marketing department. Prior to that, it had always been outsourced to agencies, just kind of as an arm length kind of a thing that was done. And now, over the time that I've been there, I now am in a position that kind of oversees the business operation, because I think when you come out of communications and marketing, you kind of understand how it all comes together. So my job now is overseeing the business operation, which is revenues, all the revenues, and the media and the marketing and the community relations, those kinds of things, diversity, inclusion's all under me. So everything, in those areas. The Reds are also fortunate that we have 2 nonprofits. So I'm kind of a dotted line to those, simply because you can't separate the shiny light that brings people to the Reds. You don't know whether it's coming because they like the past, or do they like the present? So our Hall of Fame is part of our Indigenous in our thinking as well as the current team.
Okay, so you have a big job, no joke. And what is your official title?
The official title is Senior Vice President of Business Operations for the Cincinnati Reds.
All right.
I know, it's great. And the fact that they went with not just a female, but I am somebody who does not have a secondary degree, which is what you see. One of the glaring differences between me and the peer group within Major League Baseball isn't even gender, although that's pretty glaringly different. There's not women, or not many women, but the fact that I don't have a master's degree in accounting, or I'm not a CPA, or I'm not an attorney, or I don't have an MBA. So the fact that I don't have any of that is really, I think, also unique. Probably won't happen all that often going forward, now that there's so much more done with data. You need more research, you need more information before you make strategy decisions than we did even back in 2006 and 2007. So it's really unique and rare that I would be in this role. So I think it's every day I get up and I'm aware of just how fortunate I am and how rare it is.
Yes. So talk to me, the secondary degree, a glaring difference. Are you saying that across the board or at the senior executive level?
Major League Baseball just put on something a couple years ago. They named after Katie Feeney, who was a fantastic woman in the league office who'd been there, her family tied for generations, Katie there for generations, where it was a women's executive leadership forum, if you will, where they brought in the top female leader from all 30 clubs to come in for a meeting just to kind of share. And it was really the first time women at the C-suite had been called out. So in that room, I would say if you looked at 10 of us, 9 were tied to, they were either attorneys on the baseball side, or they were HR specialists, and they had a lot of post degrees and that kind of thing. There was only one other woman I remember meeting who was actually just in the operation, who had indigenously come through the organization, but didn't come to it from a profession that was providing a professional service like legal or accounting and finance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's at the senior level.
Yeah,
so
the senior level. Mm-hmm.
If someone was, and I get this question a lot, so I'm really curious to what your advice would be, but if someone was to come to you and say, I'm starting out my career, I'm thinking about going to, or mid-level, I'm thinking about going to get my master's. Do you think I need to have it to advance? What would you say?
Yes, if you're looking at 2021 going forward, I would say you absolutely do. And you need it to be in something quantifiable. You need to be quant of some kind. You need to understand the narrative from the numbers. You need to look at numbers, be able to read numbers. It used to be that I would say, you got to know a balance sheet. You got to be able to read, you do a P&L, which you could actually accomplish in a little mini class or a mini course. But I think now it's much more sophisticated, because you're doing and it's really being dictated by the consumer, because the consumer is coming to you so differently today that it's no longer about creating a really clever TV commercial you can stick on ESPN and you're good to go. It's not about that anymore. It really is not. So I think that's what I would absolutely tell them. And unless you really were a ninja with numbers, even on the business side. And I'm not talking about the product side, the team side. I'm talking about running the business. You really need to be you need to be very savvy with numbers, not accounting numbers, statistics, data, strategy finding, pathways. Where are the consumers?
Yeah.
I know. It's very different, very different.
Yeah.
Even I wouldn't have answered the same thing probably 4 years ago. You know, but the fact of the matter is almost everybody in the United States of America, as they're buying their groceries, are doing it through some kind of a loyalty program. So the amount of knowledge that everybody now has about consumer habits, including sports, we know so much about consumers, consumer habits. People are constantly not sharing data blindly, but just kind of looking at propensities. I now understand that families who come to baseball games also are families very likely to be doing this in the grocery, or entertainment seekers who are likely to come to baseball games also go to movies this way. So now I'm seeing behavior patterns that is making me more wise about where do I manifest my brand and a value proposition to get them to come. You know, and the thing about sports will always, at its core, sports is always going to be in the event execution business, for sure. It's a time play, right? So you're always going to be focused on that. And so it used to be that was the only skill set you'd be shopping for when you were out there looking for employees. Ultimately, your front office, and again, this is the business front office portion, not the baseball side. The business side, it was event execution, and it was not necessarily a career enterprise. And you know, only about 30 to 40% of the jobs were even possibly career jobs, and people never really left those. So it was really an entry level or mid-level 3 to 5 year window, and everybody would leave because it was event execution. And so that is never going to change in terms of it being the true pistons that drive the engine. However, the differences and the difference maker, very much so like on the field side where the sabermetrics guys are eking out more knowledge about players using stats and numbers, we're doing so on the consumer side, and we're figuring out the best way to attract people. What kind of an offer can I put out there and bring them in? And the problem is front offices who operate very lean and mean on overhead are never going to hire or be able to compete for great talent on getting narratives from numbers. Those kind of consumer data quantification people, those jobs are, I mean, those people make a lot of money, and they're highly sought by companies like Nielsen, and every single consumer product brand in the world pays them a fortune to work for them. Sports doesn't. We're notoriously not paying very well anyway.
Sure.
So you're not going to be able to afford a team of people to do that for you in your ticketing world. So you're going to have to hire people in who have a working knowledge of that kind of stuff, as well as some other skill sets. So that's going to be a difference maker. I know for me, if I'm looking at resumes and I'm doing a keyword search now, I am looking for somebody who has a block from their undergrad, having done some statistical work.
Wow. Even if you're just in, let's say, fan experience.
Probably not in fan experience.
Okay.
Probably not true of all things, but the true revenue driving departments, which again is what feeds the fan experience side, and that's where most of the jobs are. If you really look at the analysis of the typical front office, even in the day and age of mobile ticketing, you may have less people banging the phones, and the difference is going to be the fleet of people you would hire when you started to win and you wanted to take advantage of the market, where you get people to bang the phones and call. They've gone by way of the dodo, and instead you're paying people to go and look at data-rich things and say, okay, like the Reds, we're starting to win right now, so where's my market, and so where do I find them, and it's going to be in the numbers. So the ticketing departments tend to have the most bodies in it, and now it's just a skill set. Like traditional box office, it used to be the box office was a pretty big department. It's now pretty small because the way people are getting their tickets is different, and it's more about techs, IT, reports people, analytics people, that kind of stuff. And then you have the other whole monster of the secondary market, which is another whole, it's just another whole phenomenon. And that's what Karen uses when I go to buy something, right? I'm always going to look at an aggregator or an alternative price point, because never before has the consumer been so empowered to shop themselves, right? So then as a person or a business, any business selling, it's way more complicated to put a shiny object in front of them that's going to get them the first time.
Yeah, so that's that. First of all, we can just end the podcast here, and I think people would have gotten so much great advice. But what I really hear you saying is, let's be honest, right? The job market, like to get into sports is competitive anyway. Now with all the recent unfortunate and very sad like layoffs that are happening, there's much more people out there trying to get in and there's no jobs, right? Or there's fewer jobs. So what I hear you saying is that's a way to have the competitive edge, is if you have
it really
that sort
is.
of background.
And I can tell you just in the last 10 years of being involved in the entry-level hiring or mid-level replacement hiring, people would come in just to get in the door. That was always the mindset. You know what I mean? Whatever the job that's on there, if it's special events, you'd have to work the wedding receptions they do on non-game days, go for it just to get your foot in the door. My advice now is don't go after that. Figure out what you want your end to be. If you really are somebody who enjoys the game experience, then become an expert in that area. Just go out and learn it and become versatile in it. So be willing to wear the mascot suit, but you better be able to video edit and animate and be able to produce the game as well as be the mascot. You've got to go and be an expert in an area and present yourself to be very silo specific, but then multifaceted within that specific aspect of the business.
Yes.
Yeah. Very different, I would tell people. Because I would take people from one area to another. I'd have a group seller who I knew always really wanted to get into marketing, but we didn't have a marketing opening. And I'd say, well, shoot, the fact they sold groups for a year and a half makes them more valuable than somebody cold coming in from the outside to do marketing for us. So I'm going to move them over. I wouldn't do that anymore.
Oh, there's so many people listening saying, okay, that's helpful, because there's people who are like, I don't want to move people. They're just passing people around within an organization and hiring without them having the experience that's needed. You know, I was just having dinner with a friend who's a director at a team, and she finally won the fight with her boss that she had to go external because she wasn't getting the right people with the right experience.
We made a phenomenally smart decision a few years ago. We had a vice presidency of tickets open up. And rather than go after the next best, greatest seller of tickets from another professional team to get one of these plum jobs, we went outside of baseball and brought in somebody from Procter & Gamble. And the reason we picked this person, that first of all, they wanted the job, and what we knew they could bring in, it was time for our ticketing department back in 2014 to start being more strategic. I have to write a quick executive white sheet as to why I'm going to do this for tickets right now in groups or in premium or in season or in renewals. It had to become a much more fiscally disciplined. We always were, but we really weren't operationally disciplined as we needed to be. And it's paid dividends. This guy he's just been fantastic. And I've watched every single person who was already really good intuitively and good performance-wise, they're now much better business people because they've had to learn how to write. That's not something we ever really valued, and now we really value it.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you say that you went outside of sports from the ticket person, but as I understand it, your team owner and the CEO of your team brought you in specifically because you had not worked in sports. Is that right?
It really is. Yeah, they had owned the team a year and really decided that the former way it had been operated, which was very true to just a sports information mindset for external communications. It was literally just get out the scores, the stats, and what time is the next game. That was really all they really did. Not that it was wrong, but it was just one facet. So there was an intention for their second year, after benchmarking some other teams, to start thinking more like a marketing company that involved public relations. So yeah, they did. And they wanted somebody who was non-baseball. Because again, the great people applying for that job and like the number 2 in command under a sports information desk model, trying to get that top tier job in what had been the old way of doing it. So they didn't want to go back to that, and they wanted to come in with somebody or something totally different. And so lo and behold, there I was, again, right time, right place, which is, I think you could stop anybody on the street and they will have their same story in hindsight. that they ended up being at the right time, right place. Unfortunately, we never really know those things till hindsight.
Sure.
Usually I'm moving ahead, usually like a person who's absolutely no clue what's next. Like, I'm in one of those Raiders of the Lost Ark things on the glass ledge. It's got to step over the abyss. I never know what's coming. But that's exactly why they brought it. And they were right. They were absolutely right. They came in as non-baseball owners. They've been involved. They've never really been the primary owner. Typical are just totally different than their core businesses. So it was a really unique experience coming into the sports. It's such an unusual sport. I always say live competition has gathered people in scale since the days of Rome, right?
Yes,
It's always been that thing. And, the one thing everybody wants, how do I get to people in scale? How do I get the largest amount of people's attention consistently? Sports has always been able to deliver that, right? So it's an amazing thing about sports. However, the research and development piece of that, in order to develop the product side, it's just a very, very different kind of business. And it's, the way Major League Baseball develops players is different than the way NBA, they basically have college as their minor league, right? Same with football, they kind of have college as their minor league. So that's the complication of owning a baseball team, is that you have the responsibility of having your own in-house product research and development world where you do your own player development, your own scouting. As a team owner, you have to spend so much time making sure that aspect of the world is correct, because that's ultimately your product. Then the other plate as an owner you have to spend is the brand. And teams, because you are high profile, and ours has been around over 150 years now at the Reds, the brand equity is there. So you also have to kind of feed that and understand, where have you lived for nearly 8 generations in the hearts and minds and time of people. Do that while you're also developing the next greatest player. So it's a big responsibility. And I think that people don't understand or appreciate how complicated that is.
How did that transition go from working outside of sports to coming into sports? And you came in as an executive, correct?
I did. I came in, and I didn't know that day one. I will be frank with you. It's not that because again, like the old imposter syndrome, I would have never applied for the job they gave me. The job I thought I was applying for was a part-time PR role, was a little bit undefined. They just knew they were going to expand and wanted a non-baseball person, and they ended up giving it to me. And what came to be was the owner's decision once I was in, and said, look, I've had this team for a year and kept the majority of the front office. They're all still here. If I bring you in from the outside as somebody I'm bringing in a year after owning the team, and I don't give you a big title, they're not going to let you in the meetings. So I'm going to make you a vice president, not because you are some genius, but because this role is that important to the new organization, the way I want to run this organization. I want there to be a role of a vice presidency that oversees marketing, and I need that role to come in at the very top, and you're just going to be the first one to step into it. And he basically said, in 6 months, come back and tell me what you think we need to do. And that's kind of what we did. At that time, the Senior Vice President of Business Operations, who's now our COO and President, he was in the role that I now fill. And he was a year ahead of me coming in, because he came in with the new ownership, because he's part of it. And just trying to think differently about how you get people. And what qualified me the most is, at that time I had 3 teenage daughters, and I was exhausted, and I had just, my schedule between all their different sports and everything they had going on was like a NATO operation. It was insane. And so I had this really clear, validated understanding about the preciousness of time. So that's literally, and again, this all crystallizes in hindsight, but one thing we knew at that moment of me coming in is that we're going to go into the time business. We're going to quit trying to sell people something. If you get their time, you're going to get $20. So quit trying to sell them anything. You got to earn their time. And the one thing they always say, your strength is your weakness, right? So the strength of baseball is the fact that it's every summer and there's 81 home games, and it's also your weakness. There's no fear of supply. So you had to kind of figure out, how do you make people want to come? So you really had to try to understand where they were in that stage of their life. Because I mean, I'm looking at you and thinking, okay, well, when you were obviously 15 versus 25 versus 35 and up, depending on what season of life you're in, your time had a different kind of transactional value to it, right? It was your currency. What mattered to me at 20 doesn't matter to me anymore at 30 kind of thing. So that's what we did. We blew up the marketing model. We created a marketing model, I will say, and just built it around the idea of time. And the other thing from the owner's perspective, who is, again, we are so fiscally disciplined. If I showed you our budget book, it's about 3.5 inches thick. It's just, we know every single nickel's ROI. So they're very fiscally disciplined. And we really had to concoct a mindset, an ownership to say that connecting with people mattered more than commerce or as much as commerce. We have to investment spend on connecting with people. We had 2 mascots at the time. One was a furry little beast named Gapper, who was kind of looked like an old slipper. And then we had Mr. Red, who was a mascot who literally looked like Freddy Krueger put on a uniform. I mean, it was the scariest looking thing I'd ever seen. So all of a sudden you're valuing connection, and the odds of me getting a shortstop to go to a shopping mall and go shake the hands of little kids is not going to happen. So we created 2 more mascots, a female and a male. We have Rosie Reds and Mr. Redlegs. Spent a lot of money. We benchmarked out in LA where DreamWorks and Disney did their costuming. And that was the kind of example that we had to get the ownership to understand that if you really connected with people, got your logo in their houses, became part of their summer, got in their Facebook, then the money was going to come second. And that's really what's transpired.
How did you get that done, right? That's a challenge for sports teams, I think, across the league, is how do you show the ROI on investing in the connection? Right?
Oh,
like,
man,
how did you paint that picture? I know that probably could be a whole 2-hour segment, but just a few things that you did that, a few principles maybe that you followed.
Yes, one of the first things, because everything you can track is against tickets, right? So we really started, as we were dividing up consumer targets, like entertainment seeker versus family versus casual fans, blah, blah, blah. As we were segmenting consumer pockets, you looked at the ballpark manifest of the kind of ticket buyers, and we started capturing them by type. You always had season ticket holders, groups, all that. Then you had the single game buyer. And thank goodness for analytics, you could start seeing that even though somebody didn't commit to a mini pack of 6 games up front, we know that this consumer came 6 times, right? So by doing that, we were able to then on the marketing side, identify where we thought there could be growth. So then we could put a metric in to say that we believe by creating a Christmas package called the Holiday Mini Pack, that we could not only accelerate some buying, but we could prove out a model that if people pre-bought and either gave it away or kept it in the 4th or 1st quarter, that they would ultimately not only use those games, but buy 2 or 3 more. So we would actually go and segment tickets, look for a segment we were going to target, and then start metricing and challenging ourselves to see if we could grow sales. And this all stemmed from stealing the greatest mission statement ever written from Starbucks, which was I happen to know it because I saw it on a TV show once, but it said, Starbucks' mission is to be one of 3 doors you go through every day. So simple, so brilliant. And it wasn't qualified to any one person. Their goal was to be one of 3 doors that everybody would go through, right? Who cares what the other 2 were? We just wanted to be the 3rd. Yeah. So it was a phenomenal thing. And so that really launched the platform we wrote kind of the connection commerce time model off of, is that our goal, every one of those ticket buyer categories that we looked at, and even these consumer pockets, we thought, how can we grow attendance in each of these? What's going to make a family come 1 more time or 2 more times? What's going to make, an entertainment? What's going to make a sabermetrics guy who'd rather be at home watching on his computer show up at the ballpark at least once or twice? It's important to us because I only make money 5 ways and 3 are tied to attendance. So if I can get the cyber bro to come in with his gang of guys once or twice a year, that's an additional person I've sold, right?
Yeah.
So that became, again, kind of the hand in glove, the way we tried to drive and understand the type of tickets that were available and who a likely market was. And our goal was to drive them to one more game.
All right. That was gold. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Okay. You skipped over something and I can't let you do that. So we're going to take a step back. But did you say when you came to work the first day or when you started, you thought you were coming in for a part-time role?
I did. They laughingly call it the greatest bait and switch of all time.
So what in the world?
Oh my gosh. It was one of those things where I actually quit the security that I had. I'd been with a company for a very long time that had flexibility, and then they were ending flexibility. So then I committed to this new job with the Reds that was going to be flexible. And so, like I said, I was already in as it was getting rewritten around me. But as things do work out, I think when you invite people to participate in writing where we're heading, be part of the aspiration, be invited into where we're going to go and build that bandwagon, then you won't leave it. And that's kind of what happened to me, is I could see and feel that there was an interest from ownership to do it different. The people that I met who were already working there were just ready for something different. And so it just kind of became this communal, great idea, adventure we all tried to do together. So that's really what kind of glued us all in and why I stayed with it. But it was it was a long time before I ever would have felt comfortable even saying what I did. People would just say, I'd just say, I work at the Reds. And they'd say, what do you do? And I'd say, I'm in marketing. I wouldn't even own the fact that I had a leadership role.
Yeah,
it is. It's hard, but the reality is, and it's the corny but best analogy that you probably heard other guests say, but if you're in sports in particular, because it is such a task, event, execution, toggle business, I'm really the conductor of the orchestra, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really need somebody who is sitting in that role who doesn't have one thing in their hand to make that music go on, but it's their job to pull it together, to be looking ahead, to know where we're heading, give everybody in that room what they need to get you there. And then as everybody's doing their thing, somebody's got to call the play along the way, make sure that it works and it comes out great so that everybody who contributed feels proud, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really what this job has turned out to be. And I think that's consistent. I would tell you coming into that, that's probably what I was able to do best in anything I've ever done, because I came out of sales. And I think when you're in sales, if you're a consultant type seller, you're really empathetic, you're a great listener, and you listen to what people are looking for and you help them solve it, and you go and boldly grab what's needed to make sure that customer's happy. So I had that muscle already. Mm-hmm. I think then coming into this role where luckily they never were silly enough to hire me to head up the ticketing department or ticketing system. They were not silly enough to put me in charge of running the scoreboard or understanding that technology or putting me in a position where I didn't have the literal technical and or vocational skill to do or experience. Mm-hmm. I was basically into this new level that they wanted to create as a new ownership group, where all of a sudden we own the fact that if we make our money by people coming to this game, then face the music, we are in the entertainment business. Period. Mm-hmm. That is what the business side, non-performing player side we have to be in. And we have to be in the entertainment business that has excellent food. We have to have great customer service when you walk in the door. And then we have to have excellent audio, visual, fun giveaways on trend. And so that's where we upped our game. And so someone like me could see that because I wasn't weighted down by the way it used to be, because I was brand new to it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm confused here because I hope you don't mind if I curse, but you're a total badass. You are good at what you do, and it's apparent in the little time we spent together. What you also said before was you would have never applied for the job that you have. And you said the word imposter syndrome. Now, I want to just probe a little bit or ask you to talk more about that, because we all suffer from that. And I hear it from my coaching clients. I hear it from when I do informational interviews. I hear it when I do podcast interviews and I'm just talking to executives. One I was talking to this morning and she said it. That's how she woke up feeling like she was not good enough to do what she was supposed to be doing. And she's really good. So just talk a little bit about like what you went through then and like kind of how you managed it and overcame it.
It's a real thing. You're right about that. And I think when I figured mine out, I had to figure out why I couldn't own the red slippers I'm wearing, right? What is going on with me? And I really did recognize all along, all through my broken road of career, is that I'd never had my sail set for that. I mean, I was first one in my family to go to college, right? And I was excited about that. And I wanted to get a job and have a career until I had my family. And then I wanted to no longer have a career and raise my kids and go from there. So I never saw myself as a career person. So I had the added burden that I think is unique to either my generation or maybe just me, but I'm still translating from thinking I failed at what I hoped and dreamed to do, but recognizing actually where I ended up was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I earned my way to this spot. Yeah. But that's where, for me, that's where my hero's journey, my storyline is for me, is that it was more about the miss of not having the financial ability to be home all the time, because I was so envious of that, because that's really what I always had wanted. So anyway, yeah. So then here I am, actually having done it the best that anybody could want, where I have amazing adult kids and I have this incredible job, that I'm part of something really exciting. And I got there despite not having written it on a piece of paper like Oprah tells me to and pin it to my wall. I got there anyway.
I'm telling Oprah.
But I got there anyway. I did. And I'm so excited to be part of this time, because I think we are at the precipice of this huge social evolution. And I am pumped about it as a person who had to have a juggle. My whole life was juggling a full-time job that I wasn't supposed to really be doing full-time, because I had a full-time family and nobody did part-time. Nobody did flex time. That didn't even exist. Work from home. What the heck is that? You worked from home if you were, selling Pampered Chef. You just didn't have that opportunity that we have now, which is awesome. It's just so great.
That's good. So what I'm hearing you say is, in terms of imposter syndrome or self-doubt that you had, it sounds like you did a lot of self-reflection.
I did.
Help manage it. Is that right?
I really did. And the place that it shows back up, because it's like whack-a-mole, okay? It's whack-a-mole. It'll pop up like all of us, whatever that voice is in your head about you that you hear sometimes. Mine now, it doesn't pop up anymore from the places that it used to. My envy, where I saw the stay-at-home moms who had it together. Yes. It's not about that anymore. Where I'm telling you, my whack-a-mole now is my peers, because it is male-dominated. I don't get invited to things because I'm the female, and that is a real deal. It just is what it is. It's not right, but I'm in a world, and again, it's not male-dominated because it's men who play the sport. It's male-dominated because people don't leave these jobs. And so there hasn't been this normal turnover pace that a lot of other industries, as they expand or they have splintered into spin-off companies where they've had all this growth at the top that they could quickly populate to reflect the time, which just doesn't open up the sardine can that often. So there's not that many jobs to bring people in who are of a different gender, a different race, a different background, alternative lifestyles. They just don't have the positions open up for them. So I'm in this world as one of the few females, and it's not great. I am enormously respected and honored by the people who work with me, for me. My whole world, we just, you end up doing life together as sports. Anybody who's listened to this, man, it is long days, and it's, 10-day homestands and you're home for a bit. So you end up doing life together, and you have that kind of phenomenal closeness that comes from being in a foxhole, and it's great. But where I do get, like, I turn into the invisible man or Harry Potter with the invisibility cloak, is in a room with the top tiers, where there are the CPAs, where there are the attorneys, where there are, the pedigreed financial folks, and, you as the ops person. And I think part of it is just ops in general, as viewed by people who study businesses on paper, Ops is simply a report. It's a line. It's a rock in their shoe.
Sure.
So I think because I'm reporting on the necessary evil side of things to begin with, and then also female and older female, it's not the greatest place to get heard.
Okay, so it's tough, and I do hear that every single day from whether it's a client, a friend. Like you said, you do life with these people. So working in baseball for 15 years, I mean, some of my best friends are all from growing up at the Red Sox professionally. Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I'm sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram at jahaanblake, and let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. What advice would you give, right? Let's give the introverts advice in terms of using your voice. What would you say to them?
I think an introvert, part of what they have to have is safety. They have to feel like they're being invited to speak, right? So if you're introverted, I think the very first step you have to do is take that bold move and put in the meeting request, right? You have to just get it on your calendar, and whoever you want to talk to, whether it's a peer or a superior or whatever, you've got to get that first step to where all of a sudden now you've got to do something and say something. And I think in that, and then setting that environment up to be whatever makes you feel okay to speak. And it could just be a timing thing. It might be, and I've seen some introverts who, after they've successfully delivered on a project, they'll come in after that because they feel most assured that they will be heard because they've just done their part. They want to be fair, so I'll show you mine. If you show, then here's what I just did for you. I've also seen it just be based on time of year, like I said, based on timing and or just the company's invitation. Most of the time it's done based on the way the company cycles their feedback loops. But rarely will an introvert get heard in a room. I'm seeing it even more on Zoom. Now that we've all become Zoomified, oh my goodness. If you're an introvert in a big Zoom session, you could have your screenshot up there and be content, because you really don't want to be seen anyway. So the chat feature, I've seen the chat feature come into play very well, the private chat from the introvert in the room to say, hey, here's something maybe I want to say, and it kind of gets them off the hook.
Right. Yes. As an introvert myself who has pushed through and prepared and done all the things, I can see the younger generation introverts, and I just want to help them.
Oh my gosh, they're more
because they have such great ideas, and I've been them and I know them, and I'm just what happens when you do it once, the next time's so much easier, and then it gets easier, and then you can still be an introvert, right? You can still, when you're done, you can revert back and go wherever you need to go to recharge, right? But when you speak up, there's this energy you get from yourself, right? It's almost like you give yourself endorphins, you know what I mean? From doing it. But
I'll tell you what, that's beautifully put. And you have to remember, my goodness, there's been articles written as of the last year, 2 years about introverts making the best CEOs, engineers making great CEOs who tend to be introverted because they love innovation, but they also like process, so we have to draw the introverts out. And, I made a comment earlier, and it's something we can never lose sight of. We are all people of our time, right? Of whatever time it is that you got sort of hardwired emotionally, you kind of carry those pathways with you. An introvert that has been incubated during this time of the individual phone and computer device in the hand, where you can, on a keystroke with anonymity, condemn people, right? So introverts of today, who are kind of coming into their own maturation, really have a lot of obstacles because they're seeing just that people are getting attacked all the time. And an introvert is not necessarily interested in being the center of attention because they're seeing now that there's a lot of negativity that comes from being the center of attention, well beyond what their experience had been. So I think we have to continue to find ways to, I love that we test our ourselves more. People are doing not just Myers-Briggs anymore. We're doing Enneagrams, and we're learning how to be the best version of who we are. And our bosses are now getting provided that information so we understand how somebody's wired. And if your bosses, like me, try to see themselves as the conductor of the symphony, you know, of course you want the oboe. When you need the oboe, you want the oboe to play, right? And
Right.
so I think that's why it's so valuable that you do self-testing, you learn about your personality, you be the best you can be within who your God designed you to be, and then give your boss that info. I've got the people, we've done that now as a group. It has been so empowering that I have a better understanding of who's in our building besides who I see on the, you know, they talk to me. I now know them more deeply. So it's a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said about the tests, right? Because I've taken them all. And the only one that I liked was the one that I did myself, which was Enneagram. So
I love the Enneagram.
So many of them forced on me at work, and I get it, right? Like there's a bigger thing in play. Just we're not going to have the one that just resonates with Jahaan, but I never really felt them. And I wish, looking back, right, is that I went out and looked for more and did my own tests, because I would have learned a lot more about myself.
100%. I had my three daughters do the Enneagram, and I had someone do it, not just a self-test, because I think the self-test, not that they're not good, because you can do that, but I actually encourage them to have somebody facilitate. Didn't take, only took a half hour to an hour, but it was somebody who probed down one or two more levels on the same question to really get to the root of it. And so they all know their number. And it's been, and what I loved about Enneagram is it says, how do you, no matter what your personality type, you can be healthy or unhealthy in it, right?
Uh-huh.
It's that old adage, your strength can become your weakness unless you're not paying attention.
Yes. And I love how they talk about that too. Like what number
do
you become when at your weakness.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. So that is one I think is really powerful. Myers-Briggs has been around a while. I'm living proof that the person who entered the Reds, my Myers-Briggs has changed. I came in as much more of an innovative, outside the box person, but because my day-to-day is more about process and operation and feasibility, that part of me has started to shift. And I'm right on the line of a couple letters, whereas before I was clearly on one side. So it is true that you can evolve, and that's why Myers-Briggs is good, but I feel like the Enneagram is more informative because you'll never really change your essence. It's just about how you operate within that spectrum.
Yes, yes. And we'll link to the show notes about Enneagram, whoever's interested in learning more about it. Tell us, if you had to do one thing differently, right? Go back in your career and do one thing differently, what would it be?
I would have started my own company.
Oh,
I would have started a business because I had a lot of good ideas, but I was too afraid. I wasn't brave enough to take one of my ideas and try to go get investors and to make something come out of it that was going to work. So that's one thing I do regret, because this concept of being an entrepreneur, my goodness, now it's a degree you can get, right?
sure.
It did not exist in my time. There was no name for it. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, it was the person who was self-employed was the kind of person you went to and went, oh, they're self-employed. That's not so good,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because your job then was your goal was to work for a big company, right? So that's the one thing. I think the spirit of entrepreneurial thinking is fantastic. I think it is actually the equipment that this generation of graduates has to have, because I know that everybody I hire better be able to do a whole lot of things. Not just, they've got to be able to, like I said, figure out what area that they want to work in, but be willing to do all different kinds of things in that category, which is exactly what somebody like you is doing, who's starting a business.
Yep.
You are doing everything, you and Stephanie, you guys are making it happen. And so, but that's what I regret. I would have done it. I wasn't at a time when that was really felt possible. So do I do it now? Here I am. I probably won't have the stamina to keep doing the job I'm doing much longer, just because it's a lot of long hours. Or is there something else I want to do? I don't know. We shall see. I've got my ear to the heavens, and I'll see what that might be.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. All right. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
I think best way, believe it or not, is email. So it's kforgus@reds.com. The reason I like email is it's easiest for me to share, pass on, flag, and make sure it doesn't get lost in my sauce. That's what I would do.
I love that. All right. Well, Karen, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
And look at your introverted self out there crushing it. Way to go.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.